The question that makes managers uncomfortable. There comes a moment in many dealership negotiations when the salesperson suddenly disappears. You've seen it. You're sitting at the desk. You've reviewed the numbers. You've pushed back on the price. You've questioned a fee. You've made an offer. And then the salesperson says, "Let me go talk to my manager." Off they go. A few minutes later, they return, maybe a lot of minutes later, maybe smiling, maybe carrying a worksheet full of mysterious numbers. And then comes the announcement. "My manager said no." Folks, this is one of the oldest scenes in the car business, and most buyers immediately assume the conversation is over. The manager has spoken. The decision is final. The negotiation is dead. But here's what most consumers don't realize. There's one question that can completely change the direction of that conversation. A question many managers don't particularly enjoy hearing. The question is this: can you help me understand how you arrived at that number? That's it. Notice what you're not doing. You're not arguing. You're not accusing. You're not making demands. You're simply asking for an explanation. And that's where things start getting uncomfortable, because many dealership negotiations are built around authority. The manager approved this. The manager won't allow that. The manager says no. The manager says yes. The manager has spoken. But authority is not the same thing as explanation. And when buyers politely ask for the reasoning behind a number, the conversation suddenly shifts. Now, instead of discussing power, you're discussing facts. Let's say the dealership rejects your offer. Fine, that happens. But why does it happen? What specifically makes the offer unacceptable? What market data are they using? How did they determine the value of the vehicle? What factors justify the difference between your offer and theirs? Those are completely reasonable questions. In fact, they're exactly the questions consumers should be asking whenever tens of thousands of dollars are involved. But yet, very few buyers ever ask them. Most people hear no and immediately move to the next stage of the sales process. The compromise, the payment discussion, the pressure, the back and forth situation, the emotional exhaustion. And that's exactly where many dealerships want the negotiation to go, because emotions are easier to negotiate against than facts. Think about it. The longer you're in the dealership, the more invested you become. You've already spent 2 hours in there. You've test-driven the vehicle. You've imagined owning it. You've started picturing it in your driveway. Walking away becomes harder. The dealership knows this. The salesperson knows this. The manager definitely knows this. In many cases, the process is designed around creating emotional commitment before final agreement. But when you ask, "Can you help me understand how you arrived at that number?" you interrupt the process. You slow everything down. You force the discussion back to evidence, back to logic, back to the facts. And that's where informed buyers gain an advantage. Now, sometimes you'll get a legitimate answer. A manager may explain current market pricing, comparable vehicles, vehicle condition, auction values, supply and demand, inventory costs, regional market factors. Those are all valid considerations. And whether you agree with them or not, at least you're having a real conversation. At least you're discussing facts, but sometimes something very different happens instead. You hear things like, "That's just where we need to be," or "That's what the market says," or "That's the number my manager approved." Notice what's missing? The explanation. Those aren't explanations, they're conclusions, and there's a huge difference. A conclusion tells you what somebody believes. An explanation tells you why they believe that. Folks, when you're spending $30, $40, $50, or $70,000 on a vehicle, you deserve more than conclusions. You deserve reasoning. You deserve transparency. That's exactly why this question makes some managers uncomfortable, because transparency requires details, and details are much harder to hide behind than authority. Now, here's another reason this question matters. It often reveals what type of dealership you're dealing with. Good businesses explain. Good businesses educate. Good businesses can walk customers through their reasoning. Businesses that rely heavily on pressure often struggle when asked to explain themselves. And that distinction can tell you a lot about what the rest of your buying experience is likely to look at. So the next time you hear, "My manager said no," don't get angry. Don't get emotional. Don't argue. Just smile and calmly ask, "Can you help me understand how you arrived at that number?" Then sit back and listen, because the answer may tell you far more than the number itself. Folks, the strongest negotiators aren't the loudest people in the room. They're the people who ask questions that require real answers, questions that move conversations away from authority and back towards facts. And that's exactly what we do every single day at the Homework Guy. Our car buying service doesn't rely on dealership promises. We rely on dealership numbers. We obtain written out-the-door pricing for you. We evaluate trade values. We identify hidden fees. We review financing offers. And we force dealerships to justify their numbers instead of simply expecting consumers to accept them. The average consumer buys a vehicle every few years. Dealerships negotiate deals every single day. That's not a fair fight. So before you spend tens of thousands of dollars on your next vehicle, ask yourself, would you rather negotiate against the dealership alone or have professionals in your corner who know exactly how the game is played? If you'd like our help, visit the Homework Guy website and click the red button to get started with our car buying service. And if you enjoy learning the questions dealerships wish buyers never asked, make sure you hit follow, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because every week we're exposing the tactics, tricks, and pressure techniques that cost consumers thousands of dollars. We'll see you on the next one.